Find out how to volunteer on Martin Luther King Day and beyond. This message is brought to you by the Corporation for National...
Welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking about slavery and gun violence in the South, and Alana has given us quite a bit of information relative to the fact of the existence of slavery, which created fear among the population, and by creating this fear, it also created the possibilities of the arming of people in order to protect themselves against slave violence. And I think you've indicated at least 3 insurrections, Alana, dealing with Harper's Ferry, John Brown, with Nat Turner, and
Stono Rebellion,
and Stono Rebellion, and etc. Now let's move on beyond the South, beyond the Civil War, and talk about some of the other things that helped to create that kind of violence in the South after the institution of slavery came to an end.
Now, when you think about violence in the South after slavery, you usually think about Martin Luther King's assassination at the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis, Tennessee. And Malcolm, most people don't think of this, but I think of this sometimes when I hear about it. Malcolm X's father and how he was in a car crash with a Ku Klux Klan member and he was severed in half. Now they think that car crash was actually on purpose, that the Ku Klux Klan targeted his family because they used to burn crosses in his yard, and his mother was so distraught over Malcolm's father's death that she actually had to admit herself into a mentally insane ward, and so he was on his own. So he moved down to New York City, where when Martin Luther King was later going around the world talking to people, that's when they met and they bonded a bit. But basically, their stories are 2 different stories. Now, when you go to Martin Luther King, you think how he had peaceful protests. He did everything the way the Lord wanted him to do it. He did it calmly, no gun violence. Now, Malcolm X, he was the exact opposite. He did things with violence. He yelled. He fought for what he wanted. Now, Martin Luther King was so much more calm. And when you think about them, some people don't notice it right away, but they were doing the same things, but in different ways. That's how John Brown and Nat Turner were. They were doing the same. Now they were doing the same thing, but for a little bit of different reasons. So basically, when you think about them, that's what you think about, their similarities.
And then the gun violence is present throughout this. Now, one of the more famous incidents I think you've mentioned to me earlier had to do with the Emmett Till. How did Emmett Till fit into all of this gun violence and this violence that was in the South?
Well, Emmett Till was a young boy when he was kidnapped from his Mississippi home, where the Ku Klux Klan pistol whipped him, gouged out his eyes, completely did so much to him, all because he allegedly flirted to a white woman when she asked him to. So if he didn't do it, you could only imagine what would happen if he didn't do it. But when he does something that a white lady asked for, he gets murdered. What would happen if he didn't do what she asked for?
And so, so Emmett Till, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, all of this violence that persisted during the institution of slavery, all pointed to the fact that many people in the South felt that there was a need for weapons and a need for guns, and not only against slaves, but against other whites who might also be willing to overthrow slavery. And I think you mentioned 2 of them. Tell me about something about John Brown. I think you mentioned him quite prominently in dealing with this.
Now, John Brown had a raid at Harper's Ferry, and he was basically a lot like Nat Turner, but there were 2 different times, 2 different places. Now, his raid was the same thing as Nat Turner. Yeah, he was like, well, we're going to attack on Harper's Ferry, kill these slave owners, but there's a catch. John Brown was Caucasian. He was an abolitionist. Nat Turner was a freedman. He was a freed slave. And now, back then, they had no idea